Hi, everybody. I'm Sean Wirtis.
Hi, my name is Richard Marceau.
Today, we're going to talk to you about what's new in Pega 24.2 Constellation. And just a reminder that Constellation is Pega's latest UI technology and UI architecture. It's also the name of our out-of-the-box UX system. And what you see on the screen here is what we're now calling the Constellation 8. These are 8 value propositions that we think make Constellation really valuable to our customers. And we're going to touch on some of these as we go through some of the new features in 24.2, but call out a few. Maybe performance might be one.
Yeah, in performance in 24.2, we definitely improve the response time of the pages. They will be much faster. We try to look at bottlenecks and things that could be optimized, and it's going to be a much better experience.
That's great. Accessibility is another one. We're not going to talk too much about that in terms of features, but it's something that we take incredibly seriously at Pega, and accessibility is increasingly important, especially given the new legal landscape coming in 2025 with the European Accessibility Act and a lot of these regulations. We work with a third-party auditor to make sure that we're really compliant, and we publish what we call VPATs, which are public analysis of that compliance, and you can actually compare Pega against other platforms. So that's something pretty cool.
Yeah, and the VPAT for PGP on Constellation is coming very soon on our website. But we're also working on accessibility on traditional UI too, because it's also important for our current applications to be more accessible. We have done a lot of improvement around customer service on UIKit, for example, around accessibility.
And security is another thing that we take, obviously, very seriously.
Yeah, in 24.2, we're not going to cover that, but there have been changes around content security policies. Now we are going to support what we call nonce, which make it more secure. And also we're adding things like no longer need for third-party cookies, for example, for the web and web. So all those kind of great enhancements help us to be more secure overall.
Great. So let's take a little deep dive on a few new features in 24.2, and we'll start with a few things under form improvements. These are improvements to capturing data in a Constellation application. And the first one is dynamic labels, which is a really exciting new feature. You can now change the labels dynamically. So in this example, we've got a form. On step 1, we're capturing this asset information. We have asset type, manufacturer, and model name. And on step 2, we want to enter the serial number. That's the name of the property, but it would be nice to have that serial number be more contextual to the data that was entered previously, right? So we can now do this quite easily in App Studio by simply adding this sort of alias to the label, and then that actually will be dynamically generated into the UI itself.
Yeah, you don't longer need to create like a field value like we were doing before. Now it's right there in App Studio. You have a nice rich text editor, and you can also select the properties. You don't need to know which property name you want to do. There's going to be a picker that helps you to select the properties that you want to see.
Yeah, very cool feature. Hierarchical forms are something, and sometimes in a single step in a workflow, things can be very complex. We've seen this, especially in insurance use cases, where an entire team has to enter a lot of data, sometimes in the course of days or weeks, even months, before they move to the next step. And this new template actually is exactly for that use case. It allows a team or users to go in and in a non-sequential way add data as necessary in this single step in the workflow. And so, and very easily authored. So we're presenting it in tabs and subtabs, and you can see here that in the authoring experience, we reference those as form groups.
And where we can see that the save for later is now the default action in this UI. So because we know that you're going to enter some data, and maybe not, you need to wait a couple of days before finishing up entering all the data for this case time.
Search and select is a common experience necessary for business apps. You might need, an agent might need to find a single customer out of maybe millions. And this new Constellation search and select template helps an agent, helps a user do just that. In traditional UI, we saw people building this in bespoke ways, in lots of different ways, and often would take weeks to build. And this is very, very simple to do. It's now as simple as a checkbox on a data reference field to engage. And then developers simply are selecting data pages which represent these search for categories, and then can make decisions here on these search groups as well. So this is a great new feature. Let's talk a little bit about data display improvements. This is how can we improve and get better productivity by presenting data better. Previously, the number of case types tabs that showed in the preview panel, which is a great productivity booster unto itself, was restricted. Now, though, one can expose all of the tabs in a particular case type in the preview panel.
Yeah, those panels were before hard-coded to details, history, and pulse. But now you can see all your case tabs, so you don't need to open the case in a full tab, for example.
Moving embedded data into a case type is critical to building Pega apps. Embedded data allows you to bring the structure of a external object, a data object, into the case, and now you can include with that structure an attachment. So here in this example, we built an expense report case type, and we now have embedded data representing each line item, and we can now, a user can now upload a receipt for each line item. For situations at runtime when a user is given a table with a lot of columns or a lot of rows and might want to focus on that, they now have a full screen view which they can actually analyze that data.
Yeah, and it just works right there. You don't have to do any configuration. You will get this new feature as soon as you upgrade to 24.2 automatically.
So map and location display, this is a new widget we have. This is also potentially critical to business apps. In this case, the user is adding delivery addresses, submitting them, and the widget actually creates a route between those points.
Yeah, and so we are planning to do some more improvement in 25 release where we can drag drop the different locations. But right now, all the routes are generated automatically by Google Maps, and you can preview that and you can act upon it.
So one of the things that we think is a great feature for developer productivity is we're now auto-generating insights, landing pages. When you create a new case type, for instance, we're going to create a landing page for you. We're going to create a navigational link to that page, a table for those cases, and the table is configured from the primary fields.
Yeah, and the fact that it's now an insights make it much easier to be used in your dashboard. So now you have a single insights that you can actually use in different places, and it's automatically configured with your primary field. So it's already built in. You can use it right away.
This is an example of that Constellation 8 developer experience value prop. Insights now supports CRUD and bulk actions. And we can now have end users customize or personalize column headings within a table. So oftentimes knowledge workers looking at a case might want to shorten the column heading, in this case, so they're presented with an alias field, and there it is saved into the table. Aggregations are now easily authored for tables and beautifully presented for end users. And a few navigation improvements. In business apps, users often create objects within the context of a workflow. And so we don't want to necessarily move them directly from their context, from where they were. We want them to make that decision. So what happens now in this case is the user is creating something in a modal, as we do, and we get a notification in what we call a toast, which pops up, called a toast because it's like a piece of toast in a toaster. And now the user can make the decision to either follow that link to the newly created object or to stay where they were in their workflow. It's a productivity booster as well. We've improved the assignment list here. One of the things that we got some feedback on was that if you have, especially for child cases, it was unclear how the hierarchy of those cases and those assignments should, and now it's presented in a way that hopefully makes that.
Yeah, and it really scales now with a lot of assignments. You can even expand collapse and really get to the work. Right?
Yeah. So a lot of what we talked about Pega Gen AI Coach, but I just wanted to point out that it is a built-in widget now in Constellation. And it's beautifully streamlined, easy to get to at any time, even if there's an affordance, even if the utility panel is closed, users can now get to this to be coached.
And so on mobility, we're also now starting to support offline for our mobile client with Constellation. This is an example of an inspections application for field service. Right now, the user is offline. And as you can see, we can open attachments. Here we're opening a PDF file in offline mode, but also we can go back and perform a case. So this is all built on Constellation application. And we in this demo, we are turning back the online mode. And then we are going to submit the case in online. So the transition from offline to online is very seamless. And this is a great user experience, exactly the same view model that you use in your Constellation application, but rendered with our native component and our mobile application. And on alternative UI, this is an example of the Gantt chart in the Constellation UI gallery. The DX Component Builder is a great way to be able to extend the out-of-box Constellation UI and design system. And in 24.2, we are going to introduce a new version of the DX Component Builder that we call Library Mode. It's still going to be a beta version, but we think it's going to improve the performance of those components. And we're going to bundle all those components in a single library. It's going to make it smaller and faster to load. And also in 24.1, we released a new version of the SDKs for React, Angular, and Web Components. Now Angular 18 is supported. And this quarter, we will also release the new version of the SDKs for 24.2 with the support.
Thanks all for joining us for Constellation 24.2. Exciting times.
Thank you.